Hi everyone, it is so awesome to be able to talk to you guys live. I'm super excited for this talk and I hope that you guys are also very excited. So I'm just going to start off by introducing myself one more time, just in case anybody doesn't know who I am. So my name is Ernest Porter and I'm a professional photography guide from South Africa. And I'm extremely passionate about nature and wildlife photography, especially action photography. And that is what we are basically going to be focusing on in one of the most prestigious destinations in Africa called the Khalakhadi Transfontia Park. Okay, so without further ado, let's start with the presentation. Okay, first off, I would once again like to thank ClickTrip and Camera World for making these Facebook Live talks all happen. You guys really rock. So let's see what the talk is going to be about. So we are talking about Khalakhadi, action photography in a photographer's paradise. Now, Khalakhadi is a little bit of a hidden gem in Africa that I don't think a lot of people know about, but it is really extremely unique and such a paradise for photographers, as the title mentions. And then obviously this presentation is by Ernest Porter. So where is Khalakhadi Transfontia Park located? And then I now have this slide for you to show you exactly where on the South African country it is located. It's actually between three countries. As you can see, we've got Namibia on the top left, Botswana on the right, and then South Africa at the bottom. And it is basically where the three countries meet. So just give me a second. I just want to show my PowerPoint second screen. Don't mind. Okay, there we go. Okay, perfect. So what I just would like to also mention is that you would basically fly into Johannesburg, which the airport's name is OR Tambo, and then you would want to fly to Upington. There's an airport at Upington as well to get to Khalakhadi. And then it's about a 2.5-hour drive from Upington to the southern gate, which is called Tweerefieren, and also the biggest main camp. Yeah, so that is just where Khalakhadi Transfontia Park is. Let's continue. And I'm going to now attempt to explain to you why Khalakhadi is such an amazing destination. Okay, first of all, you have to understand that it is an arid park. So it's a semi-desert, but a semi-desert filled with life. It is such a dynamic park. Every visit you go and do there, even in the same season, can be extremely different. For example, you can see in January 2019, when I visited there, it was an extremely dry year. It was just brown and dust, etc. And then when I went in January 2017, it was a completely different park. It was green and there were beautiful flowers all over. It's just amazing how dynamic and how much Khalakhadi can change. So every visit is unique. It really is very special and super exciting. Now, on the right-hand side, you can see a map of Khalakhadi. So Tweerefieren is the main camp that I mentioned in the bottom side if you enter from Upington. And then we basically have two main roads splitting in a fork. So we've got the one going almost straight north, which is going towards the camp called Nosop, which is also another main camp. And then there's another road going to the left that goes to Mata Mata. Now, the interesting thing about these two roads are that they are basically inside a river. Now, because it's an arid park, the river almost never flows. And if it flows, it's about 2 centimeters high. It's really that dry. But it basically means that all the animals and predators in this park is so concentrated at these low-lying river sections where also these gray dots are all water holes for the animals to drink, so that also lures them in. But there is such a massive concentration of wildlife along these two roads. And you might think that the Khalakhadi is very limited because there's two main roads, but because all the animals are lured into those areas, it's unbelievably dense with predators and photo opportunities. Okay, so that is actually something that makes Khalakhadi really unique compared to other places. Because I've been to many other arid parks, but because it's not as much of a concentration, you kind of struggle to find animals. They're more scattered, they're more far away, where they really get close to you on these two main roads. So that is really a very big aspect of Khalakhadi. And then, as I mentioned, you can see there is a lot of water holes, and water means life. So we're going to get a lot of bird life, a lot of water-dependent antelope that needs to stick around there, and then that would obviously bring in cheetah, leopard, and lion, etc., because they're after the antelope. Now, another beautiful thing about Khalakhadi is the openness of the landscape. There's not a lot of vegetation in front of your animals, like you can see on the top left corner here. You can see from the tiptoes to the top of the head almost 80% of the time. So your leopards, lions, cheetah, all of them are so open. The cheetahs are chasing these animals in these open spaces, great for photography. It really just fantastic. And then another beautiful thing about Khalakhadi is that there is such an abundance of predators. Now, if you look at the predator densities in the park, it really isn't that much compared to other parks. But remember that I said that they are so concentrated on these two roads that you might think that there's more lions and cheetah in this park than Kruger Park, although there might only be 10% of Kruger Park. It's just because they are so dense to those two main roads that it feels fantastic. And then the last thing I would like to say why Khalakhadi is such a unique park is because of the intimate sightings you can get there. Because the animals are so located next to the roads and you don't have that many roads to go, you can easily re-find predators. Now, I've been there, for example, on a 6-day trip, and I found the 4 same cheetah brothers 5 out of 6 times. So almost every single day I managed to relocate them. And I basically followed these 4 cheetah for a whole week. Now, that is super special. That sounds like National Geographic, where these guys just follow an individual and stick with them and go off-road and follow wherever they go. But there is that kind of aspect in Khalakhadi where you can find the same individuals because they're somewhere on these roads. So you can obviously lose them for a day or 2 or 3 or maybe a month if they really go far. But a lot of times it works out that you can find the same individual over and over. If you're there for a week, for example, you can find them 4 times. And that to me is so special because it just becomes a story if you're able to follow a specific individual for that long and that easily in a national park. Okay, moving on. I've mentioned that there are 3 main camps. So we've got Tuirafiran, Mata Mata, and Nosop. And then 2 other interesting camps, which I'd also have to mention, is Irikaris and Khalakhadi. Now, these camps do not have power, but, well, they've got power for the chalet, but they are on solar, so it's a limited power. But they are in the middle of nowhere where nobody are. So it really is such an intimate experience to stay there. There's only 4 chalets at each, so you can only host up to 8 people in that whole area. Now, just to give you guys a quick idea of where they are, we've mentioned Tuirafiran at the bottom here, Nosop on the right-hand top side, and then Mata on the other end of the other road. Now, in between Mata and Tuirafiran, we've got Irikaris right in the middle, and then Khalakhadi just closer to Tuirafiran. So these 2 camps are really, really special. If you ever can get availability there, take it. It is super difficult to get availability. That is the one disadvantage of these 2 camps. They are not that expensive, but they are really difficult to get availability at. And you obviously have no shop, etc. at them. Okay, so that was just a broad overview of the 3 main camps and then 2 special camps that you guys can definitely also look into. Now let's look at what you can find in Khalakhadi with regards to action photography, mammals, and birds. So first off, I have to mention that Khalakhadi is probably one of the best places to get cheetahs and cheetahs hunting specifically because of that open spaces and the predictability of mammals or antelope sticking in the rivers and the cheetahs just waiting for them there. I have literally seen 5 kills there over the last 4 years. And this photo, for example, is one where the springbok actually managed to get away, even though that cheetah was that close. So it also just shows you do not underestimate these amazing springboks. They are super fast. Now, I personally still dreaming to get that perfect shot of the cheetah launching himself and grabbing the springbok in air. Unfortunately, all 5 kills I saw and could not get that dream photo I'm after yet. Now, in the next photo, you'll just notice that I blurred out a section of the dead impala just to not violate Facebook's list of violations. But this was a complete hunt that I also saw, but unfortunately they ran so far and I did not plan it correctly. It was unexpected. They ran the opposite direction than I thought. But you can still see it was a fresh kill, and I managed to get there just after they took down the springbok. But super special to be able to see cheetahs hunting this frequently and with this much opportunity to photograph. Next up, another cool interaction between cheetah that I have seen in Khalakhadi is these 2 male cheetahs wanting to mate with the female. Now, the female is on the left, and you can see the 2 males being quite dominant and trying to get her to mate. She was not ready to mate yet, so she was being a little bit aggressive and defensive, and eventually they did let her go. Now, you'll see that on some of the photos I have given you guys the settings and the camera and lens I use just to aid. I know a lot of you guys are photographers watching, so I've selected a few photos where I will be sharing information like this. So in this photo, we obviously got the 7D over the 70 to 200 2.8. And you will also notice that I kind of love shooting at f2.8 just to get you that maximum background blur. The risky side of it is obviously that the depth of field might be too little and you might be off the eye. But I am a bit of a high risk, high reward photographer at this stage of my photography career. So I love shooting at f2.8. And then next up, another photo in that sequence where you can see this female just being really defensive. She's lying in her back though, so that basically means that she's doesn't want to challenge them, but she's not ready to mate yet because she will go at them if they get too close. But yeah, such a super unique cheetah sighting that I got in Khalakhadi that year. Next up, we've got the big boy. So lion, the biggest of the 3 big cats you get in Khalakhadi. Now, Khalakhadi really is a great place for lions. And I've seen both lions with blonde manes and black maned lions in Khalakhadi. So first photo tip I would like to share with you guys is to get photos like this, you obviously need a slow shutter speed. But I have created a way to set my camera up for slow shutter photography in a way that I can instantly switch to it without setting too many settings. So in other words, I might see this lion walking with a normal camera setting to freeze action, and then all of a sudden I see him start running. And I can literally, it will take me 1 second to get my camera ready to take this shot. So the trick with this is, the first photo tip is, most cameras have basically custom modes. So on Canon, we've got a C1, a C2, and a C3 on your main dial if you look at the top of your camera. Now, you can program any of your modes into one of those banks. Now, what I normally do is I go into my shutter speed priority mode, which is called TV on Canon. And then I would go and set the shutter speed, for example, to 1/50th of a second, which is the shutter speed I used on this photo. And then I would also just go and set the ISO to 100, and then obviously the aperture will be floating to get your exposure right. Now, setting the shutter speed at 1/50th and the ISO to 100 is perfect for slow shutter shots in bright sunlight. So that is basically how I set up my camera to instantly switch into this type of photography, to be a bit more creative and not just always freeze your subject, but to show some motion in the photos. Next up, we've got some youngsters playing with mama. So lions can sleep up to or from 15 to 20 hours a day. Now, that could end up meaning you can sit with lions for hours and watching sleeping lions with no activity. So knowing this, you have to kind of know how to go about photographing lions. Now, the best time to do this is really early in the mornings and late afternoons when it's cooler and when they start getting active. And then also identify drizzly or overcast days when it doesn't get hot. And this is exactly when I got these guys playing in the road. And you can see some of the raindrops, and it was not hot, and they were really active. And I managed to get a lot of lions playing because I found them on the perfect time. Next up, we've got the same pride of lions, and just another photo of two youngsters really going at each other. Once again, I have shared my settings with you on the top there. So with this photo, I used the Canon 1DX with the 400 f2.8 Mark II, and you can see the light was not that much. I shot at f2.8 and ISO 1250 and only managed to get 1/2000th of a second in that light. Now, I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to see mating lions, but it is quite an experience. The thing about mating lions are that you have to always be ready for the ending of the mating session, because that is when the female will show aggression and she might snap towards the male or smack him in the face and he'll jump off, etc. So always be ready for that ending, and always make sure you've got enough space above the male lion, because if he jumps up, he obviously could go out of your frame. But yeah, just if you ever get that opportunity, get ready for the end, and then you could end up with a photo like this. And this photo was taken also with the 1DX and the 402.8, once again at f2.8, and I managed to get my ISO all the way down to 160 for the shot, which is great for low noise. Now let's move on to another exciting and amazing big cat, and this is the African leopard. Now the story behind this is quite interesting. So back in January 2021, I was in Khalakhari again, and I managed to find this very young leopard. He was actually still with his mother, but his mother ditched him in a certain area for 3 days, and he was by himself, and we picked him up on day one of him being alone. And he literally moved less than 100 meters every day. So for 3 days, I could find this young leopard almost at the same spot 3 days in a row. So that was just fantastic to get that intimate sighting of a leopard, a young leopard, and follow him for 3 days, see what he's up to. And then because his mother left him, he was bored out of his mind. So he started doing some interesting stuff. Like he also got hungry because he didn't get food from his mother for 3 days. So he went up to one of the waterhole reservoirs and started catching doves, which was pretty awesome to see. So let's see what happens. He's down at the bottom there, lying flat in the shade while the doves come in for water. And then the next photo, he's jumping up and boom, he snatches one of them. Unbelievable how fast these leopards are, really. It is such an amazing thing to see. And then I must mention at one point, the leopard wanted to jump on top of the reservoir. Now, it's not really a lot of space for you up there. Your balance needs to be perfect to stay up there. I've seen adult leopards go up there without any problem, but this youngster still obviously has to work on his balancing because he fell into the water, and luckily there were no professional photographers on the day to capture that embarrassing moment, luckily for him. Next up, we've got a black-backed jackal. Now, this might be more of a common animal. You might see a lot of them during the day. But believe me, this common mammal can be one of the most entertaining animals in Khalakhadi if you can find it doing something super interesting. So what is this interesting behavior I am talking about? I'm going to show you now, but first I'm just going to explain what's happening in this photo. So in this photo, this black-backed jackal was running through water, but he was running away from a springbok that was chasing him. Now, these jackals take some of the springbok lambs in the lambing season in January, so the adults can show aggression towards jackal, and yeah, he was just basically running away from the one big male that was chasing him and running through the water, which gave me this amazing photo. Okay, so back to the behavior that is freaking amazing with black-backed jackal, and that is they love to catch doves at waterholes, especially if you see 100,000 doves just ascending to this one little spot of water. You might see a lot of awesome activity there. So this photo, we can see this jackal leaping or running straight towards me with this wall of doves just flying up and trying to avoid or escape him. Next up, I've got another photo of the jackal jumping over the water towards doves. Sometimes they are quite bold and have interesting hunting tactics. And once again, I've shared my settings with you. So in this photo, I took it with the 70 Mark II and my favorite lens, the 400 2.8. Once again, at f2.8 again. As I mentioned, I love shooting at f2.8. Next up, we've got a flying jackal. So now this is really at full speed, that last meter before you catch a dove. And you can see I just managed to freeze him in flight and just get the perfect shot. And I was shooting with the 300 millimeter f2.8 lens on this day, which did not give me much space for the jackal. I did not crop it this tight. This is how close the jackal was. But I was really hoping for that intimate photo of just the jackal and the dove instead of giving me a lot of space around. Next up, another photo of two doves colliding as they're trying to avoid the jackal's mouth. And then you can also see a little sparrow also flying off from the bottom here. But yeah, you guys can just imagine if this jackal does this 15 times in an hour, how much activity and fun you have trying to photograph it and track it and get these shots. It can be so much fun. And then last photo of the jackal is another photo tip I would like to give you guys. So now I just mentioned this jackal might do like 15 of these attacks towards doves in one morning. Now, if you already got some good frozen action shots, it might be a good idea to start experimenting a bit and trying to get something more artistic or something different. So the photo tip is to always think outside of the box. Try and improve or do something different to what you have been doing, especially if you've got the opportunity like this jackal giving you 15 attempts. So that is just the tip I wanted to give you. And then I obviously shared my information again, and I shot at 1/80th. At my setting that I told you, I just adjusted it from 1/50th to 1/80th, and then 100 ISO, which is once again great for low noise. Now we have covered the predators in Khalakhadi, but let's not forget the herbivores. They can also give you sometimes great action photos. Now in January, you will see many baby springbok in Khalakhadi. This is the time when the babies are around, and this would mean that it is such a great time to go for Khalakhadi with regards to hunting, because these baby springbok are everywhere, and the leopards, lion, and cheetah really just take them out left, right, and center. They're a little bit of an easy kill for these predators, and they're so much in abundance that you just get like 3 kills a day. It's unbelievable, but so much photographic opportunity. I know that it's not everybody's cup of tea to see a baby being killed, but it is obviously part of nature and have been happening for millions of years. So if you are interested in photographing that, January is the best time for you. Just a little warning, 40 degrees to 50 degrees Celsius in the desert can be a little bit hot. Next up, we've got an Oryx, which is a bigger antelope in Khalakhadi. And, oh, sorry, I mean there's another springbok, 2 males just playing in beautiful sunlight. And once again, I've shared my settings with you. At this point, I was shooting with a very old 600 f4L lens. And then, sorry, now we're at the Oryx, which is a much larger antelope. And according to me, one of the most beautiful antelope in Africa. They just have these beautiful, massive spears on their heads, which are obviously very dangerous. And you can definitely see it in this one's face that he wanted to get out of that situation quickly. And then just another photo in that sequence. Okay, next up, let's look at the last mammal for this presentation. And this is the ground squirrel. Now, these little guys are kung fu fighting monsters. They are so fast, and you will have so much fun trying to keep up with them. And you might even get frustrated because they are that fast. But I was just in camp one day, And as I was making lunch, these two caught my eye, and they started doing some amazing martial arts moves right there next to me. So what did I do? I ran to my car and I got my camera and I took some amazing action photos of these little guys doing their thing next to my spot or my campsite. Just another photo. Yeah, quite amazing, these little guys. Okay, next up we've got birds. So the most iconic raptor in Khalakhadi, I would say, is probably the Falcon, the bird we're looking at now. And they really are also amazing. They're very similar to the Jackal, where they target the doves at the water holes. And as you can see, on this specific day, the antelope decided to just come into my way so that I don't track the falcons easily. No, I'm just kidding. Remember, we're working at water holes, so that lures in all the animals and they all benefit from the water holes. Next up, we've got a blurry Lana Falcon in the background with a whole flock of doves flying away. So also a very iconic shot that I love. Now, the next shot is the shot that took me 5 years to get. And it is a Lana Falcon just before it strikes a dove. Now, the first time I saw a Lana Falcon hunting, this is the photo I envisioned, and I chased it for 5 years before I finally got it perfectly. And as you can see, I took it with the 7D Mark II and the 400 2.8, once again at f2.8 and ISO 320. Now, to get photos like this from a vehicle is very tricky, especially if you're shooting with a 400 2.8 lens, which is a massive lens. So you need to use stabilization on your vehicle or small hand-holdable lenses. So that is just another photo tip. Stabilization can take you very far. Now, I'm going to show you what I have used to get this photo with a big lens like that. Because I was going to this spot for 6 days in a row, 2 to 3 hours every morning. You can't hand-hold a 400 2.8 for 2 hours. You'll die. That is just too heavy. But I will show exactly what I used a little bit later. And then next up, we've got a Springbokke watching the Lana Falcon carrying the dove away. I just wish I could have traded spots with the Springbok, because it would have been such a great approaching shot if I got it from the front and not the back. Next up, we've got tawny eagles fighting. Now, tawny eagles are much larger than Lana Falcons. And you can see on the right-hand side, we've got a juvenile and an adult on the left. And they were fighting over a tiny little dove. And just adult raptors know that juveniles are crazy birds. They would put their body on the line for the smallest little scrap. So let's see what this juvenile did. There he's going in. You can see all the dust being kicked up. And at this point, the juvenile is on top of the adult. That really illustrates it perfectly. There you can see the little dove lying on the ground. The adult is upside down. And then just look how proud that juvenile is standing there with his chest. I was like, yeah, I just put you down, big boy. And eventually the juvenile did end up with the prey. So the next raptor we're going to look at is Battaliers, which is one of the most beautiful raptors in Africa, according to me. And they can be so great at Khalakhadi. So they love to come down to the specific waterhole called Kabiki Kwap, just north of Nosop. And this happens at midday, though, so the hottest time of day. So you just have to get your settings ready to shoot in that bright sun. And we're looking at the moment at a youngster, but an adult, for example, is black and white. So shooting black and white in midday in the sun can really be tricky. So another photo tip I can give you is to get your ISO as low as possible, because this will get your cameras to its best dynamic range and lowest noise. And then just make sure you do not overexpose the white spots where the sun shines. And then later on, you can lift the shadows to get some details in the black. And because you're shooting a low ISO, you will not get too much noise in those sections. Now, the last raptor we're going to look at is a conflict between a redneck falcon and a juvenile Gaba Goshawk. Now, these photos I brought into the presentation to just always remind you guys that if you're after raptors, you always have to be ready for action. They are so unpredictable. I was literally just photographing this redneck falcon perched on that stick at the bottom there. And then this Gaba Goshawk came and attacked him. And all of a sudden, I was just lucky to be ready and I got it. But if you're after raptors, always be ready. They are so aggressive towards each other, and you can end up with some amazing photos. And you can also miss it so easily. So there we go. There's the second photo in the sequence. And then the third. Okay, the last photo tip for the day is, remember, settings are very important in photography. But there is another thing that's also quite important, and it's obviously the photographer's skill. How stable can you keep your lens for tracking, etc.? And you obviously have to be able to follow this bird. So you guys can see that I am shooting with a 400 2.8 or a 600 f4, etc. These are big and heavy lenses. So I can handhold for short periods, but not for too long. So I need stabilization. I'm going to show you two stabilization methods that I use. One is for walking around, and then the other one is the one that I used for the Lana Falcon hunting in the car. So let's look at what I do when I have got an interesting situation where I can get out of the vehicle and photograph walking around. Okay, so in this slide, you can see 3 photos of me. And I basically bought a few things to create this setup. And just before I mention what they are, can you see that in the first and last photo that I'm actually not holding anything? My hands are free, so I can still text people or check messages on my phone, etc., while my camera is safe and secure, strapped in there, and it can't fall. So this is really a nice little setup. I must mention that it can be a little bit heavy on your back, so I would not recommend doing this for 3 hours. But I have definitely identified some situations, for example, where there's a lot, let's say, for example, a raptor building a nest, and it flies over you, over the tree, etc. And it just is very predictable in that area. So I would take this system with me because the camera is not attached to the ground. It's attached to me. So I can literally do a 360 circle around, and the camera just follows me wherever I turn or move. So it really is a fascinating system to have if you are doing difficult raptors in flight, for example. Now, basically to do this, I've got a monopod. I've got a gimbal head mounted on top of the monopod. And then I've got a fishing belt. So just an ordinary fishing belt I bought. I added a few nuts and bolts at the bottom there so that my monopod doesn't just slide out. And then I've also got a harness. So these universal harnesses you can buy at any shop for like binoculars or your camera. And then I've just added an extra little strap to the top there so that I can use the system without using my hands to hold the camera secure. So with those few items, you can create this awesome setup. Next up, let's look at what I use to photograph fast-moving falcons from a vehicle in Khalakhadi, for example. So this is an illustration of what I use. Now, you see these funny things mounted onto my doors. They are called GimPro door mounts, and they are fantastic, fantastic equipment. Now, what makes them super awesome is that you'll see that there is an attachment there with a long arm. And you can loosen this. So you can actually swivel your camera from left to right. And it can go from left to right with this gimbal head as well. So you've got a double movement. You can go left and right at the same time, or double left. So it's just a completely fluent system. Your camera can go 20 centimeters to the right, 20 centimeters to the left, up, down. It just really is great. If you are forced to shoot from a vehicle like this, these things are great. Now, I also brought up this slide because this is a new tour that I'm starting to bring out that's going to be available from the ClickTrip website. And they are called private safaris. Now, these private safaris are only going to be up to 2 photographers with me in the vehicle. So these gimbal head and GimPro door mounts are going to be accessible for both photographers, one photographer in the back, or one in the front, and these gimbals will be on the opposite side, and I always park the car for these photographers to get these shots. Now, you can also book just one person with me, and then you can sit in the back and you get both sides of the vehicle with 2 gimbal heads on each side if you want to. Now, I am still in the process of putting these private safaris online, but it is the first private safari is going to be to Kruger National Park, which I will probably finish in the next 3 days. And then at the end of May, or maybe a little bit closer, I will probably be finished with the Khalakhadi private safari as well. The logistics there is just a little bit more tricky, so that's why I just need a bit more time to set that up. But yeah, if you're really interested in photography in a flexible budget way, this is a great safari for you. And because we are in a closed vehicle, we can go out in the rain, we can stay in the park as long as we want. If we find a leopard sighting at lunchtime, we can say, you know what, we'll have lunch a bit later. We're sticking with this leopard. It's totally flexible. And I give my private photography instruction attention to the photographers in the car. You're not sharing with anyone else. It's only up to 2 people. So it will be a safari with a lot of Photoshop workshops, Lightroom workshops, photography coaching, and assistance in the vehicle. So it'll just be like the most amazing photographic tour ever. And then I'm just have another slide to take you guys a bit closer to the system that I'm using on my vehicle, which is the GIMPRO door mounts. Now, if you go into ClickTrip website, you'll see that we have another type of safari available, and that is called the Big 5 safaris. Now, you'll notice there's 2 variants. There is a traditional camp safari and a luxury camp safari. Now, at the bottom, this is a photo from the luxury camp safari, and the top one is a photo of the traditional camp safari. Now, the big difference between these two, and not just the price, the luxury is a little bit more expensive than the traditional, but the luxury camp has got very fancy luxury chalets and a swimming pool at the lodge. And this specific area is great for leopards. So if you really want to come to South Africa and get a lot of opportunities with leopards, our luxury safari, camp safari, is definitely geared towards leopard photography, where our traditional camp safari is more general wildlife. So it will include leopards, but just not as much as a focus on leopards as luxury. But both of them are in Big 5 areas with cheetah and wild dog as well. So the Super 7 are available from both. The traditional, just more diverse, I think. We'll probably find more diverse there. And in this luxury safari, you'll find a lot of leopards. And then another thing I love about the traditional safari is that the camp is such a rustic camp with no fences. And once I was there and I was having lunch, and this big bull elephant came and greeted me while I was eating lunch. I took out my cell phone and I took a quick snapshot of it, and it went off. So yeah, that is quite an awesome experience to have an elephant that close to you. And then another thing I obviously have to mention is that we have a discount code for a 10% discount on all Big 5 and private safaris. So go on to ClickTrip website, and that is where you can book these safaris. And remember to take a screenshot or whatever of this discount code. I think it will also be sent to you through a message, and then you guys will get a 10% discount to any safari, or Big 5 and private safaris. Next up, I would just like to mention a few more listings I've got on the website, so on ClickTrip's website, and that is I've got a action photography, photographing raptors in flight in the Kalahari. So it's similar to today's short little presentation, but I go into a lot more technical photo tips and techniques with this presentation. And it is great for groups. So if you're a camera club or even one individual, this is a great talk to book. So if you guys want a speaker at an event or at the end year function, this will be a great place to book if you're interested in action photography. And then I also have Lightroom and Photoshop online courses available on the ClickTrip website. So if you want to learn how to organize and edit your photos with Lightroom and Photoshop, you can go check that out, and I will be happy to teach you. And it will basically be a Zoom meeting where there is no rush. We can do 1 hour today. You can go play around, master it, and we can do the next session of an hour the next day at the pace the client wants. So that really makes these Lightroom and Photoshop courses so much better, because you're not forced to learn everything in 3 hours. We can do one course in a whole week, and you can really master everything that I teach you. Then I just have to mention that Camera World are offering a 5% discount for all new Canon products, and the link will also be shared to all of you. And then I would just like to end off the presentation with ClickTrip website so that you guys know where to find my safaris and my listings. And yeah, if you guys are interested in booking another talk, course, or a safari with me, this is where to go. And remember the discount codes to get a nice discount. So we will now be moving off to questions. I hope that you guys have a lot of questions for me. I love answering questions. So I'm just going to stop the presentation and then we can move off to questions. Okay, so I am back. Okay. I'm actually going to just turn off the camera because I need to kind of look at questions and stuff at the moment. Okay, you guys see, if you guys would like to have a look at me, that is fine for questions. So yeah. I really hope that you guys have enjoyed this live broadcast. And I hope that you guys are interested in Khalakhadi. It really is a fantastic place for photography. And yeah, no, it's difficult to explain to you how awesome it is. It's something you kind of get addicted to it after the first visit. So that is another warning I can give you. Just be careful. You get very addicted to Khalakhadi. Okay, so we've got a question here from Etienne, and he asks, do you sometimes use auto ISO? Definitely, I do use auto ISO. I usually start out with an auto ISO. So let me give a scenario for you. Let's say we're in Kruger National Park or Khalakhadi in a game park, and we are driving around. We can kind of get into many different light situations quite quickly. You can be shooting a jackal in the shade there, and all of a sudden a raptor flies in the sky. So an auto ISO obviously gives you a way more flexibility to shoot in shade and sun. So I normally start off with my camera in aperture priority with an auto ISO, and to get that first few shots quickly so that the camera does the work. But as soon as I start spending time with an animal, let's say the jackal hunting, then I will start moving off to a manual setting and just get the settings exactly as I want. But yeah, starting off with aperture priority and auto ISO is definitely the best way so that you are super quick to be able to capture unexpected behavior. You know, sometimes that first 2 seconds is the most important. That is when the leopard would look up because you just appeared with a vehicle. So to be fast in those first 2 seconds is very important, and that is why auto ISO and aperture priority is a good way to start off with. I hope that answers your question. And then Carol says she can't wait to be back in Africa. We just need the government to allow us to travel. Yeah, I'm sure we're all on the same page with that. Traveling has been a little bit non-existent for almost 1.5 years now, and we're all craving to go back out into our favorite destinations over the world and continue with life. Okay, so another question that I've got is, do you meet up with other photographers on your travel, or is it a solitary pursuit? Now, I do not really meet up with too many photographers, depending on what type of safari it is. A lot of times when we do photo safaris, like at the luxury lodge or the traditional camp, we try and do it in a way so that there's only one photographer at the lodge, because it can be a little bit conflicting or difficult to have 2 groups on the same vehicle of different photographers. So in terms of those safaris, we do not meet too many other photographers, or we at least split vehicles, and then we only see each other when we are not busy on the vehicle. And then on private safaris where I can go to any camp with the clients, yeah, you can bump into other photographers, meet some nice, interesting people, learn a thing or two from them, and get information, share information. So with regards to the private safaris, yes, you definitely meet other photographers. And, you know, if you're passionate about the same thing, you're kind of drawn to each other. So you will ask someone, did they see a leopard? And then you end up speaking 2 hours about your last leopard sightings. So, yeah, no, definitely do meet up with some photographers, just depending on the situation. Okay, so another question, how easy is it to get around in the Khalakhadi? If you are self-driving, is it best to just wait by the waterhole, or is there action everywhere? How similar is it to Etosha? Okay, so Etosha and Khalakhadi are similar in a way that they are both arid parks and that they both have waterholes. However, Etosha has got less waterholes than Khalakhadi and a lot of open spaces where I have found animals in the wet season, for example. So in the wet season, it can be a bit tricky in Etosha because they can scatter everywhere. But in Khalakhadi, that doesn't happen because the rivers are always full of life. So it doesn't matter which season you go, you always find high densities of animals around those two roads, the rivers. And then the waterholes also attract them. When it rains a lot in Khalakhadi, then the waterholes will not be as effective. So you will then obviously want to drive on those river roads a bit more, search for a wandering leopard, etc. But if you're in the dry season and you see 100,000 doves coming down to one waterhole, you obviously know what you're going to do. You're going to sit there and you're going to photograph jackal catching and laners catching doves, etc. So you kind of have to just analyze it if you're self-driving. You know, is it wet? Are the waterholes productive? You have to test it a little bit. Drive around, check at the waterholes, and then make a decision. Khalakhadi is extremely diverse. Every day is different. If you get something amazing, seize the moment. It's not to say that it's going to be there tomorrow. So always have that in mind. And then the first part of the question is, how easy is it to get around in Khalakhadi? It is not very difficult. The three main camps have all great shops. So you can buy your essentials there, but you do have to do some homework if you're doing self-driving. There are sandy roads, so if you don't have a 4x4, you can get stuck and you'll need someone to assist you to get out, etc. And then you'll obviously have to take your fridge with to keep your food cool, depending on what food you take. So there are chalets and camping available at all three main camps. Chalets can just be very difficult with regards to availability, even camping at some times of the year. But yeah, depending on which one you choose, obviously the camping will take a lot more preparation than just a chalet. But I have seen people going in a standard Toyota Corolla to all three main camps. It is possible, but it's also possible to get stuck in sand with those vehicles. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Oh, one more thing I would just like to add. At Nosop and Mata Mata, they switched the power off from 10 at night to 5 in the morning. So if it's in summertime, you might get a little bit hot with no aircon or a fan, nothing being able to assist you at that time of night. So, and also your fridge, you need to close it and keep it closed throughout the night so that everything stays frozen for that 5 hours that it's not, the electricity goes off. So Cecilia asks, which is my favorite lens? And it is definitely the 400 f2.8. It is a big zoom lens. So 400 is especially a lot of zoom on a 7D Mark II, which is a 1.6 crop body. But the amount of light, the f2.8 on such a big zoom just really gives you so much potential for action. And also shooting f2.8 gives you a lot of background blur and the opportunity to keep your ISO very low because of all the light coming through. So those are three main benefits and why I love the 400 f2.8 so much, and it's obviously my favorite lens. So another question, thank you for your presentation. Amazing and beautiful photos. What are the rules for protecting the environment? So I assume this is specific to Khalakhari. So Khalakhadi is a national park, so there are quite a lot of rules that you have to apply to if you are doing a trip into Khalakhadi. You are not allowed to drive off the roads at all. It's a super sensitive environment with a lot of animals and insects burrowing into the ground. So if you're going off-road, you're going to be crushing a lot of wildlife. So that is, I think, one of the most important things. If you ever see anyone off the road in Khalakhadi, just tell them, guy, this is a very sensitive area. You cannot go off the road. So that is obviously very important. You are not allowed to litter, which should be applicable to everywhere in the world. And then you also have strict gate times. So you can only go out at a certain time, and the gates will close again at a certain time. So you can't do your own night drives, etc. You have to be in camp when the gates are closed. So those are a few rules with regards to the park. And then it's always super important to practice ethics as a wildlife photographer. So I'm also a qualified guide. So we call it the GASA, and I can drive people in a big 5 area. So I had to get the qualification, etc. Now, one thing that we guides look out for when we are following animals is checking the nervousness of an animal. So let's say, for example, I'm driving in Khalakhadi and I see a leopard ahead. I will now start approaching slowly. And if that leopard looks nervous or starts running, I will not try and chase it down because you're just going to push it further away. It is obviously a shy leopard, not habituated and used to people. So your best opportunity there is to actually keep your distance, and maybe the leopard will approach you if it wants to come into that direction. So that is just another little example of your own ethics that you always have to apply to photographing animals. It is a very big question that you can probably go on talking about it for 2 weeks, but I hope that I have answered most of it for you. Okay, then Carol said she stayed at Rooiput and Shotube Lodge, which is on the Botswana side. Fantastic camps, no fences, I think even maybe no power. It's really wildlife. You just go there, camp, and all the lions, leopards, everything can come through your camp. So yeah, just imagine waking up in your tent and you've got a pride of lions licking the dew off your tent. Now that sounds awesome. Okay, I assume I did not skip any questions, and I see not a lot more popping up, but we will stay online for a few more minutes if any of you have any questions or anything awesome to share. I'm always happy to hear about your experiences and your plans, etc. Oh, she said she stayed at the lodge, not the camp. But at Rooiput, there is a lodge and a camp available. So yeah, either one has got its benefits and disadvantages. When I do my own vacations, I'm a bit more of a wild heart. I would like to go into a tent, into an area where there's no fences. And like I said, you just have to practice some precautions because you do not want to be caught out at night with a very hungry leopard between you and your tent. But yeah, no, the lodge is also fantastic and obviously caters a bit more towards the overseas visitors. Thank you, Carol. It's a pleasure, Carol. I'm really glad you guys did enjoy the presentation, and I'm happy that it's not been a waste of time. And I hope you've learned something from it, and I hope that you are excited to go visit Khalakhadi or maybe book a safari with me. Okay. I see we have about 5 minutes left. So any more questions, you guys are welcome to post. And if you guys want to leave and say goodbye, you are also welcome to do it. Thank you so much for joining me on this presentation. Linda, I would love to host you as well and meet you in person. So let's hope COVID blows over at some point and that we can go back to traveling. Okay, thank you so much for Camera World for assisting me. And then, okay, so there's one more question popping out at the end, so I'm happy to answer. What first got you interested in photography? So that is an interesting question. So my parents and even the parents before them have always been very passionate about wildlife. So being South Africa, we have the Kruger National Park, which is a massive national park available to anyone in the world, but it's super accessible for locals. So we would have, my parents would have taken us to Kruger Park every year at least once since I was like 5 years old. So and they basically got me into nature by taking me to these destinations for vacation. And when I finished school, I basically bought my first camera, which was a Canon 550 550D, and the twin kit lens that you get with it. And that is when my hobby for photography started. And then as I really loved photography and nature, it started progressing into a professional state where I am now a professional photography guide for a company. So a hobby transformed into a profession. I actually studied financial management at the University of Johannesburg, but there's just a little bit of a lack of leopards in the city of Johannesburg for me. So I'm definitely more interested in working with photography, which I love, in the bush with beautiful nature. Thank you, Mikhail. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Okay, so this will be your last opportunity to ask a question if you've got any more questions. And we are almost signing off in about 3 minutes, then we are done. Thank you, everybody, for all the awesome messages and all the compliments in the messages. I will read through them one more time after the presentation to make sure that I don't miss any of your awesome comments. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Cecilia. I really hope to see you at my next talk. I'm not 100% sure when it is, but I'm sure it's going to be soon. Thank you so much. Okay, perfect. I really think that is all. So I am going to be ending the broadcast now. So once again, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you guys on Safari. Okay, Cecilia, thank you so much. Bye-bye.